Check that, Alex. Hold up. It's not going live. Hold up. Oh, no, we are live. Sweet. It happened.
All right.
I think I tried to go live on Instagram for the first time, and I think I just failed miserably by doing that. So, what's up, everyone? Alex Miller here, CEO of Hiro. Excited to have you on, Alex. How's it going, man? Welcome back to the show. We had you. We were live at the LA Blockchain Summit maybe like 2 years ago. Last time I talked.
Yeah, I was gonna say a year and a half ago. I want to say something like that. By the way, I can confirm that I just got the pings from Twitter that where I am tagged in a thing that is currently live. So I do think you successfully put us live right now. I was going to say you guys have like the best intro little animation thing.
Oh, thank you. A lot of Easter eggs in there.
Yeah. Did you make that yourself?
We creatively designed it, and then we had another firm put it together. That was a little bit beyond what a at the time seed round startup could do.
Nice. Yeah. But I'm doing good. It's beautiful out. I've been on the road every single week in the month of May, and I am now back home for like all of June, and I am thrilled with that development. I cannot believe I was a person who used to enjoy traveling a bunch. It is like the actual acts of travel. Like I don't actually mind being on the plane that much, but being away from home now is terrible.
Yeah, it's like you want to kind of just compact like the time away, especially for like a business trip. You know, it kind of feels like, I'm not going to say it's like a young man's game, but in our industry, it feels like people, if you are younger, you just kind of hop from conference to conference and just try to like co-work there at those places where if you get a little bit older, you got a family, a house to take care of, then you're kind of like, hey, I'm going to take the red eye back, which like you never would probably do when you're younger.
Yeah. And ironically, of course, taking a red eye when you're younger is the thing that it's easier to take a red eye when you're younger. But
yeah. And so tell me a little bit about some of the travels. Like, I know this year, it's kind of this whole Bitcoin renaissance that's happening. We've been really supportive of everything that's been going on. It's been an exciting moment with ordinals, crazy that they're already over a year old with that whole movement. And then, building on Bitcoin, had the halving. Things are moving forward, but like, what have the travels been about? Like, what are you out there talking about?
Yeah, so it just feels like May is like just heavy conference time and also heavy retreat time for things. Like we had our company retreat. I had one of our investors held their annual summit. Another one of our investors held their annual summit, and I did not go to that one because like I was at our retreat during it. So I think May is just like number one, just a huge time for people getting together, and I think coming out of the hibernation from winter and early spring. And then I was in Austin last week for Consensus. Were you down there for that or no?
I did not go. Okay. I was supposed to actually be at the Lisbon conference for ordinals, but the family thing came up and I couldn't go.
Like that's another great example. Like there was cross programming between Consensus and like the Lisbon Bitcoin ordinals conference. It just so many things going on it. I had a cousin's wedding. I was in Washington, D.C. meeting with congressional staff and things a few weeks ago. So just all kinds of different stuff all over the place.
Anything you can share about what you were meeting with in DC about?
Yeah, everything I met with people in DC about was proven wrong in both directions within a week and then 2 weeks after. So like this was seriously, this was a week. This was like, so I was actually in DC like the day before Lemus got the 30 signature on her discharge position for the SAB 121 repeal, so of course that then did end up passing the House, and the Senate vetoed after sitting for a couple of weeks by Biden. So we were talking about that. We were talking about Fit 21, which of course did end up coming out and like pass the House, but will now unfortunately probably die in the Senate. But I think is just a good sign of how much movement there is. It was before Selkis got Trump to come out and endorse. So like, on one hand, it was like interesting conversations, but it was also just a very world of difference between where Washington's attitude around crypto was 1 month ago versus where it feels like it is today, with just a lot more interest and openness and people just understanding that, in fact, like this is going to, at least to a degree, we can argue about how much, but to a degree, it's going to be an issue in the upcoming election. And just it's a pervasive thing that's not going away. I think there was almost this attitude among some people that like especially after FTX and after the last bull run, that like crypto was just going to die off and go away, which is like, to me, a bizarre thing of like, if you say it totally changed your views on crypto, or you no longer trust, don't want to, fine, sure, I understand how it would affect your views about crypto overall. But the idea that, like, especially given the number of boom and bust cycles it had already gone through, that it was just going to cause it to like wither away and die was ridiculous. And so I think the last month has really shown an acceptance from a lot of like the lawmakers and just the inside DC crowd that, oh wait, this actually is a thing that's sticking around, and we probably need to deal with it in some way or another.
And how much do you think the ETF had to do with that overall acceptance?
Very little, I think. I think it's much more the political realities of like the upcoming election right now, because the ETFs have been around for months and
No movement.
yeah, I don't think we saw a lot there on it.
I actually think it was a pretty smart move. At the end of the day, I sit in a place where I think all politicians, they just want to be in office again. Like that's
Yeah,
like their entire goal. Like, right? Like just
yeah,
get back in office. RFK had a little following there and he was pro crypto. And really, Trump has come out and he was not pro crypto before. And so I think it's kind of like a genius move to say, hey, I now support this, whether or not he actually like believes in what's going on. But he probably just someone's like, hey, there's someone else that maybe has a chance to win, is leading a lot of polls.
yeah,
Just that little sliver of that 1% could be a huge deal for him getting elected.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say, given what the projections are around the tightness of the races, um, anything can move it.
It's kind of wild when you think kind of going back, just a couple years ago and being in the industry, like just this idea that of what we're talking about. Like you're in Washington talking to people about the acceptance. We've got an ETF. We've got presidents, like you said, Selkis is, on stage with, former President Trump talking about crypto. It's pretty incredible, like the life cycle of what it's all gone through. And like I try to think to myself, I'm always thinking, 5 years from now, based on where we were 5 years ago in 2019. I mean, 2019 feels like forever ago, with where we were in the industry. Where are you kind of thinking, where does this go? If someone like a Trump gets in office, he is pro crypto. Like, what do you think you see in the first, year here with regards to, some of the things that happen, some of the revelations that happen in the industry?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. So, look, I don't think that Trump getting into office does anything sort of, let's say, crypto's not going to be at the top of his priority list.
Right.
I think there's a whole bunch of other stuff I think that they're going to find way more important and more focused on. Frankly, there's a lot more important things in some ways, but I think the biggest impact on crypto that it would be is like, obviously the entire, financial and regulatory state is going to be quickly changed, because all of the people who've been really focused on not being super good at working with this industry over the last 4 years will be out of a job on day one, right? And I think you're going to have obviously a much friendlier administration at the SEC level, at the Treasury levels. Whether we get some kind of market structure bill or something done is much more about what happens in Congress than what happens in the White House. But again, even there, it's not like even if you had the friendliest Congress to and administration to crypto ever, they're not going to make like a crypto market structure bill the number one thing that they pursue out of the gate on January 21st. So, like I said, I think the biggest change you'd see come January 2025, if you do have a change in administrations, is just a much not nearly as adversarial.
Yeah, less negative pressure
Yeah,
versus
exactly. The negative
positive
pressure is the way
pressure.
to put it. And I think, I think that's long term, hopefully a good thing. But again, if we're gonna get a really good long term culture here around building for crypto in the U.S., that's going to take actually getting a regulatory structure in place, as opposed to just having a not bad enforcement by regulation by enforcement administration, because it'll just leave everyone on their toes that like, okay, well, fine, we're like in a better place now and people will do some building, but what happens 4 years from now? And so hopefully, by the time you got to like past the initial part of the term, you'd actually be able to get something like a good market structure bill in.
Yeah. And how much of what you were talking about there and, with your conversations is, there's Bitcoin and like holding Bitcoin and like the Bitcoin ETF, which is fine. Then there's infrastructure and building and capital markets and startups, right? And the kind of capitalism side of this where innovation, and that's kind of been what we've all been talking about a little bit, is people just, offshoring companies. That's like what happened with a, FTX. And then you don't
Yeah.
have kind of the same purview that like a Coinbase or like a Kraken has. I also find it very interesting that like a Bahamian company that goes defunct suddenly is like the entire, like everything is like in the United States as far as like everything that goes on is just crazy. It was like, oh, we just, boop, we take you and we bring you back over here. But
Yes. Welcome to America and the power of the dollar.
yes, it's pretty incredible. But how much were you talking about kind of just infrastructure innovation, not losing this stuff offshore
Yeah,
and how
I'd say
important that is?
that's 100% of what we were talking about. Like, for me, I was meaning for folks about regulatory clarity, right? So, for context, for folks who don't know, I run a company called Hiro Systems. We're a dev tools company for Bitcoin and stacks. Previously, in kind of our previous iteration, we ran the first SEC approved Reg A offering for tokens. If you go back and you look at what we went through to that, it cost us a lot of money to do it. There's still a lot of regulatory overhead from it, even though that token is now decentralized entirely, the stacks token. Like, we have no control over it. It's mined. Again, it's completely decentralized. We have no control over it, but we kind of still have to file a list because there's no good off ramp from having been an issuer to no longer being one. And so that was one of the things we were talking about, is like, look, if you want people to actually do this in a compliant way, you have to give them both the on-ramp and the off-ramp for it, right? You have to create a structure for it that actually makes sense. And so it was going through talking about our experiences there, talking about how it's limited our growth in certain ways, how it's driven off, stopped people that we've wanted to work with from being able to do it. But at the same time, also talking about like, look, people want it. People are willing to work with us, and I think are interested in working with us because of the legitimacy that comes from having done this regulated offering, right? Like, nobody wants to get scammed or anything like
Right.
that, right? And like, one of the funny things is when, I've seen plenty of people argue that like, okay, we just need the government gone entirely from being involved in this. I'm like, yeah, you can have that, but you know who else is not going to show up if you have no regulation in a space? Consumers. Because like,
Right.
consumers don't want zero regulation on things. They want to be confident. They want to know that bad actors are going to be punished and, ideally prevented in the first place if they can, but if they can't be, then punished and prosecuted afterwards. So yes, we do need regulation. We just need a regulatory framework that actually works with the realities of like what this new technology is. And, you can even go off a lot of the principles that were written 100 years ago, but you got to update it somewhat.
Yeah. And maybe you could talk a little bit about, like you said, talking about Hero a little bit, and like, what are you guys doing on like a day-to-day basis to make that a reality now?
Yeah. So for Hero, we're as that beautiful webpage right there says, we're all about building on Bitcoin layers. So we're a
Yeah.
developer tools company for Bitcoin layers. Right now, we primarily focus on stacks and ordinals because those are just we think kind of two of the biggest projects, two of the biggest areas to focus on right now. So APIs, APIs for stacks, token metadata, ordinals, explorers for stacks and ordinals, SDKs, smart contract frameworks. Again, literally our goal is just build like end-to-end everything you could need. And you'll notice in that upper right-hand corner there's a nice bright orange button that says open platform. I don't know if you, Joe, have tried building anything through the Hero platform yet.
We haven't, no.
Okay, well, you got to check this one out. So the entire goal here is to basically be able to go from creating, writing, debugging, and deploying a smart contract in your browser. You literally get your own VS Code pod spun up in there. If you want to work locally, you can connect it via SSH. But again, it's just an entirely hosted environment for building and deploying smart contracts.
This is
And just
pretty
kind of
cool.
the easiest way for developers.
This is really cool. Maybe we'll have to spin something up and utilize this for when we launch the Nakamoto 1 to the moon.
Yeah,
So maybe
exactly.
we'll have to figure that out. No, this is great. And so like maybe you could talk a little bit about why is it important? Like, why is this like, why is this Explorer important? Why is it important to have this infrastructure and someone there? And like you said, like you have investors too, right? So even though it's an open source, and you guys are contributing to the ecosystem, like you guys still have to make money, right?
Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're a developer tools company. So like our ultimate goal is having as many developers building in our ecosystem as possible, and ultimately, buying a lot of these tools from us, paying for API usage, that
Little
kind of thing.
Easter egg here, by the way. Market data
Um,
provided by LunarCrush.
yeah, look at that. Hey, I know
Boom.
those guys. So you're looking at the Stacks Explorer. That I would say you're looking at the Stacks Explorer right there. That's the primary
Yeah.
explorer for the Stacks ecosystem. I probably don't have to explain to anyone who's plays around in crypto why explorers are really important. We actually just finished a totally new redesign of it that you saw there for the upcoming Nakamoto release coming up at the end of the summer for Stacks, which is bringing like 10-second blocks instead of one-to-one blocks with Bitcoin. So we had to like totally re-engineer exactly how that whole UI worked, because like, oh wait, if you have a block every 10 seconds instead of a block every 10 minutes, that old interface you were using doesn't really work that well. We've added all kinds of tooling recently around like transactions, understanding what's going on in the mempool, being able to forecast what you should be paying for transactions. For anyone who was around, there was a huge, back sort of towards the end of December, we got hit by the huge meme coin blast with STX 20s. I think we literally had like a 10 or 20x increase in network activity just from some of that stuff. And so it just brought up this whole thing of like, oh, right, as like network activity increases, people are going to need a lot of these tools and stuff. And so, one of my big goals as a CEO of a company like this that's in a space that's so fast moving is like, how do we both, keep our view, how do we have a long-term roadmap of what we want to build and where we're going, but also like keep this nimbleness and reactivity to understanding like, hey, things are going to happen just based on the larger macro environment, based on what our community wants, based on what degens do. Everybody knows degens drive a lot. How do we maintain flexibility both to like just do small kind of like surprise and delight features, or just fix a lot of the small stuff that people might need, and as well as like the overall strategy shifts. Like, how do you know when it's worth investing in something? This obviously came up a year ago with ordinals. What I think Casey technically like it hit the chain back in late 22, but really like
January was when
January,
it really
February is
started
when
going.
awareness came
Yeah.
to ordinals, and when Casey like really announced it, and we had to move pretty quickly to decide like, hey, are we going to invest in this area? And ultimately, we made the call to, because we think that we could see right away it was going to be very good for helping people understand like why building on Bitcoin is great. And I'm sure you guys have seen this too in your data. The amount of influx we saw of people coming back, and like basically, the way I put it is, it revitalized the builder culture that was lost after the blockchain wars back in 2017.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so we were immediately like, look, we need to capitalize on this, both because we just think it's good for the Bitcoin ecosystem to have good developer tools, good user experience around this, but also it's good for Hiro as a company because it brings just, we saw a bunch of people were going to come in and want to be building on ordinals, and we wanted them to be using our tools for doing it. Yeah, there you go.
This is the chart of when people started to talk about ordinals on social media, and you can see like in December, there's like a couple of
Yeah.
comments or interactions, and then I mean, look at where we're at
I'm
today,
sorry, I was
millions.
told ordinals were dead, or I was told ordinals were dead. What's going on here?
Yeah, completely dead. You
Yeah.
could tell here, no one's talking about it. Thousands of creators, millions of interactions, positive sentiment, and then obviously, like you said, memes and a lot of fun. And we
Yeah.
know that those things together in our space means traction, tons of traction.
Yeah.
So it's
So I would say, yeah, ordinals has been great for us. It's been huge for us as a company. But like I said, more importantly, it's been amazing to watch the amount of excitement and invigoration that's come back into the entire Bitcoin ecosystem because of it. And like, look, we've been pushing the Bitcoin layers narrative for years at this point. And as much as I would like to take credit for all of this, I without a doubt, we would not be in like, the Bitcoin L2 hot girl summer that we are this year without ordinals having just reinvigorated this and brought in so many builders on it.
yeah, I mean, even runes, and you mentioned STX 20. I do want to talk on that because, like, John, our co-founder on our side at LunarCrush, and we kind of went in and we were minting out a bunch of
Yeah.
STX20s, like what, like it's inscriptions on stacks. Like
Yeah,
what, like
basically, I
explain
mean,
what it is.
it's the
Yeah.
same as they were doing as people are doing with BRC20s, uh, basically, but there's a memo field on Stacks transactions, and you can just write whatever you want in there. And then if you build an off-chain indexer, you can take that and boom, you make your own meme token standard. And of course, like the really funny part here is that the reason, BRC20s were created the way they were on Bitcoin is because Bitcoin doesn't have a fungible token standard, obviously. Obviously Runes is sort of an attempt to do that, but it's still not native to it. You're still relying on off-chain indexing. Stacks has a fungible token standard. Like Stacks has SIP9 and SIP10 tokens for NFT and fungible tokens on it that you could do that are doing, they're just doing contract calls exactly, very similar to ERCs. And yet people just really love the super low, for lack of a better term, janky. I say that in a loving way, but the janky approach of like, nope, let's just write crap in a memo field and like build an indexer to recap it. It's easier for people. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but people like it. So we
any alpha from your side? Are you guys going to try to continue to support it in interesting ways, or anything you guys going to do to help kind of build that ecosystem?
Yeah, I'd say, I think for us, our goal, we build it almost the way I put it is slightly less opinionated infrastructure and tooling layers, right? So we don't, we're not going out and building like entire dedicated STX20 APIs or something, or like saying, cool, here's how you should be using this. Rather, we're going through and we're just building like whatever the most robust, powerful, fastest, most stable infra that we can give people are. And we're like, cool, build what you want with this. And so like, if you want to build another, like API or data layer on top of our APIs, like great, go for it. We've had people do that. Once standards really get set, then we'll often incorporate it back in. So a good example of this is like, we have the ordinals API. We added, once the BRC20 standard was mostly set, we went and added that, and we're actually part of the kind of like oversight committee that Domo set up for BRC20s at the Layer 1 Foundation. Runes is coming out, so I don't know if I'm allowed to tell people this, but with Runes out, keep an eye out. We got some stuff coming down the pipe.
Okay. I like that.
But I'd say we're not necessarily looking to be like the first company to ship support for something, but we are looking to be the people who have like kind of the best, most stable, most reliable thing.
And how do you manage that with like your team over there? Like you're saying, you're trying to stay nimble and iterate on things and try things out. Like, do you have kind of like a part of your team that's like a skunkworks part of the team a little bit, where you're like, hey, go try this little thing, and if you don't figure anything out in 60 days, come back and we'll try something else?
Yeah,
like,
so we have a lot of really small. So first thing is we have a lot of really small teams, and I've especially as a we're an entirely remote company, and this has actually updated my view on running remote companies a lot. I've worked with remote teams for a long time. I was at Stack Overflow for 8.5 years, and we had a very distributed engineering team. So yeah, I'm 14 years into running primarily remote teams at this point. And although this is my first job where I've been remote, I'd say, one of the things we focus on is we keep really small engineering teams. We have a 25 person eng team at Hiro, but they're building like 9 products total across everything. Gotcha. If you go and look at the website. And so each team is only like 2 to 3 people. But the great thing about that is, when you have only 2 to 3 people on a dev team, everyone's a high performer because there's nowhere for someone to not be. The other thing is we really only hire pretty senior devs. Almost everyone on our dev team is a senior software developer or a staff engineer. And that's sort of, it's both, was an accident originally, but it's kind of by design now. I think there's a whole interesting question of the problems that this poses for the next generation of developers. And I would love to hire more junior people. But just as a company, like for where we are and the speed of how things change, it's just not in the cards for us right now. Like we've found a setup that works pretty well for it. Those small teams though also mean like the people who run like our API, who run our Explorer, who run the platform, like they have really amazing ownership over what's going on. They can just do it. And we do have some product org too on some of the products, but a lot of the products are just run by the devs who do it. So number one, that's the thing, is just very big on just trying to push ownership and empowerment down to the devs and like the staff engineers who run each product. Second thing is, if there is a question of a thing, like again, I'll go back to ordinals because we absolutely did this with ordinals, is we said, okay, this is a potentially interesting thing. We don't know what it is. We can't build a 6-month roadmap for this now. So cool. You two go take 50% of your time for the next 2 weeks, figure out and build something. I don't really care what it is. Just go start building something with it, right? Okay, we come back 2 weeks later off that sprint. We kind of get some interest from that. All right, this is interesting. Hey, look, it looks like there's a need for an API here. Cool. YouTube, 50% of your time, next 2 weeks, go get an API up. Go. And so we went very iterative in those early days of just like, cool, let's just take 1 or 2 week sprints, put a couple people on it to mess around with stuff, and come back and feed the information back in and go from there. And so we did that. And at this point, of course, now that's our ordinal C. It's a full-on kind of Bitcoin layer 1 team that is working on those kind of things now. And like they go through our normal planning process and whatnot. But yeah, the next time that something potential interesting experiment comes up, then we'll just do the exact same thing. 2 people, 50% of the time, 2 weeks, go build something.
Yeah, I love that. And we noticed that when working with you guys on our APIs that we would kind of work the same way with like a small team. And if people have autonomy on their side to make decisions, right, and then they have the ability or the capability to build the thing, it's incredible how fast things can work.
Yeah.
Right. Someone asks a question, the other person asks a question. Okay, it's done. It's working now. Right. It's like it's that quick to have those kind of quick and nimble teams. And what are your thoughts? Talk about AI a little bit. I've noticed like in my kind of personal dealings, even like the amount of productivity gain that I've had on scaling up, whether it's content creation or writing or just, email, like grammar check type things and coming back and giving ideas or like a lot of times ideating on stuff. Like I've scaled myself like incredibly, right? Especially when it comes to like PR, it's like, oh, I need to write like a little press release on this, right? It used to be like, hey, go to a PR firm, maybe they kind of help you out, or like if you're a good writer, you can write that out. Now it's like, hey, here's like the guidelines from this company. Here's our guidelines. Here's our last like 20 press releases. Here's what I want you to say, go. And it's like perfect. Like, are you, injecting AI into what your workflow is every day personally? And then, is your team using any sort of like Copilot to, kind of start working with that in code, or are they also kind of working with it from a personal side?
Yeah. So let's see. I'll start with me personally. Personally, I'm very hot and cold on AI tooling these days. There's some stuff I found it's great for. Code in particular, man. I use ChatGPT to write code all the time, and it's great because like I'm not a very good developer, and so, but I'm a perfectly good product manager, and so I can write a few paragraphs spec and like. I mean, one of the great things is I wrote like a bunch of code that pulled, or I had ChatGPT write a bunch of code that pulled data from our own APIs at Hiro. I literally just said, here's the docs, here's the endpoint I want you to hit, here's the data to pull from, write it. And like, I don't want to remember how to write like loops in Python or like I never remember how to invoke the CSV writer in Python to like output a CSV file. And like ChatGPT knows it great. The flip side of that is code's like AI is terrible at writing like Rust blockchain code because it just doesn't have enough examples to work off of. And so that's also the reason I think the approach I've taken then that we've taken at the company is it's very individualistic. Everyone can use whatever tooling that they want, subject to like some data security standard stuff. But we don't have any like AI tooling that we're deploying at the company level. And frankly, I don't think any of it's any good to do something like that. But a lot of devs are either using Copilot, but more common than using Copilot is just using ChatGPT. And the way in talking to folks that I think most are using is, again, remember, we have a very senior team here. And so what they tend to do from talking to folks is like they treat kind of ChatGPT like a junior programmer, where it's like, okay, here's what I want you to write. It writes a 90% good enough thing, and then they can just skim through and clean it up and make it like a little bit better. Or again, have it handle specific functions and things where it's an easy thing for it to do, but they don't want to have to spend the time on it. So I'd say there's a pretty good amount of AI getting used in some different places here, but it's all very much on an individual basis, which is, I think, kind of what the most effective way to use it right now is, because then it's always getting human eyes on it, getting reviewed, because I've yet to almost ever see a piece of AI output from anything that is ready for the world without a human giving it at least a pretty good once over on it.
Yeah, you still got to give it a pretty good look to make sure, something's in there that's not, and it's like there's the way that you talk, it's like, it's like, do you really want to always be just like a robot? Like, that's not the way you speak or the way that you write. So there's some like authenticity issues there.
I've always found that I am a better editor than first draft person. And so I really appreciate literally the generative part of generative AI, right? Just like I have a blank page, I want to not have a blank page. So give me just something on the page here in front of me. And it can be really helpful for that.
100% agree. And yes, it's like it feels like AI is at a spot where it's just making everyone slightly better, like individually. And then, it's not at a point yet where it's like the company themselves are like all working together on it. It's like everyone's just kind of like independently getting
Yeah.
smarter in their own interesting way.
Yep. Absolutely. And like I think it's going to take a while before AI is actually good enough to handle a lot of stuff. Let's just call it unsupervised.
Yes.
I think we're
I'm like,
far away.
I feel like half of social media now, not half, but like the bots are getting even smarter. And it's like, but it's like
And that's the
bots.
thing, right? Like you can
And
always
then, but
tell.
bots to block it too,
Yeah.
and it's like, now it's like, how much compute is over here being used for like fake engagement and then something to block that fake engagement? It's
Oh,
like,
I'll give you an even dumber example, which is that like AI is turning English into a computer language. And what I mean by that is like if you think about you dealing with like think about the next time you have to fight with an airline over getting a refund. You're going to use an AI engine to write a complaint letter to the airline that you're going to send them, that their AI agent is going to review and use to send a response back to you. And then you're going to copy and paste that into your AI to generate it. And so now you literally just have two computers talking to each other, but instead of using an actual computer language, they're using English because like
yes,
they both need, I mean, the cynical way to look at it is they need the pretense of being it. The flip side is it's the fallback of it. I mean, the same thing's going to happen, is already happening around recruiting and stuff too in a lot of companies. Like, again, we don't use any AI to like screen resumes and stuff, but companies already are starting to use it. Because frankly, if there's false positives or false negatives, they don't really care there. They're just trying to reduce like the amount of flow that they have to deal with. But yeah, it's going to lead to some really absurd situations in the next like 5-10 years.
that's interesting when you think about customer support there, because ultimately, like you're just looking for an outcome, and the airline's looking for an outcome, and like
Yeah.
there's probably weights there to like how far you're willing to push and how far they're willing to push and what they're willing to take. And it's like the
Well,
computer could probably just solve that instantly versus like talking in English about it.
so I think it's going to totally end up bringing back like buyers clubs of like the 90s and stuff. And I don't know how many people know about this, but there was literally like, it's like signing up for a AAA discount, right? Like a AAA and using their discount, right? They pre-negotiate discounts. That's like been on the decline with the internet and everything the last few years. But I feel like almost to a degree, like, look, or think about your cable bill, right? Like they can either, constantly deal with your AI, pinging their AI system, asking for a discount, negotiating every 12 months that it's up and, doing all this crap. Or you can just like, you sign up for the AAA or the do not pay or, whatever buyers club. And like, they just have a preset discount where the AIs don't have to spend any time negotiating against each other and save all that compute cost.
So wild, like the world that we're gonna live in. Like I think about, I came out of school in 2008 and like Bitcoin wasn't even like launched yet. And now it's like I've been operating a business in the industry for, 5 or 6 years. And it's like when I talk to young entrepreneurs and, they're like, I need to find a job out of school or I need to figure this out. It's like, you have no idea what the industry is that you potentially are even going to work in 5 or 6 years. Like there might be a brand new industry and you're going to school trying to figure all this stuff out and you don't even know where it's all headed.
Yep.
Right. And this is just such a good example of that. Wanted to ask you a little bit, I know, you're always kind of posting some cool stuff, some personal stuff. I know you've gone viral before for like cast iron pans and everything else that you put out. We're going to live that down.
Consensus last week. And of course that I meant like a crypto dinner with a bunch of CEOs and stuff. And of course the conversation turns into that damn cast iron pan.
It's almost like you could get to rewind it. It's cool though. It's your like 15 minutes of like social fame. So, tell me a little bit about, maybe it's more a question about the type of individual like that you are and what's kind of made you gravitate towards being in this industry, staying in this industry. Do you find other like-minded individuals that, it's kind of like that sovereign individual feel, but also you're going to Washington and, we need some regulation and everything. Like maybe you could talk just a little bit about like what drives you in this industry and what, why you're here.
Yeah. So I started working full-time in crypto in 2020, May of 2021. So, just in time to catch the tail end of the last bull run. And like, I knew it wasn't going to last forever. So don't worry. What's the thing that brought me over here? So as I mentioned before, I'd spent 8.5 years at Stack Overflow. I'd spent a bunch of time working in DevTools. I kind of like DevTools. It's funny. I like working on stuff that's bleeding edge, but at the same time, I'm not like a futurist or great at like envisioning the future myself. I much more prefer like executing and building on top of things. And so I think that's kind of what always clicked for me in the developer tools space is I really enjoyed the like, cool, I'm going to go build a bunch of tooling and infrastructure that helps people like execute on their visions, build that next generation of things. Like I said, working at Stack was one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. And like, it's kind of hard not to be when like every day you walk into a room and people are like, oh my God, you work for that. Like, it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I was definitely thinking about like, what's next? And I was thinking about like, the fact, so I also graduated school in 2008 and it was funny. I'd been thinking about the fact that I was kind of jealous of like the mid Gen Xers who graduated school in like 95, 96 and got to like be young in that first internet boom. And obviously
Yeah.
there was kind of a crash, but like, man, how friggin' amazing would it have been to be like,
Pets.com or like,
that's
yeah,
yeah,
like,
any of them at an
yeah.
early ISP or just like anything working in 95, 96 as the internet's coming out and like feeling that energy, but also then being able to look back 10, 15 years later and be like, look, I was part of that. And so I was thinking about like what's the place to capture that feeling? What's the thing that will potentially have the same impact on our world, or just like on the way people communicate, in 10 or in another 10 or 20 years. And like there's kind of two obvious things you could go and work on. One of those is crypto, the other one's AI. And I think if you look at it, one of those is a fundamentally power centralizing force and one of them is a fundamentally power decentralizing force. I chose the power decentralizing force one. And so for me it was like I was thinking about it and then just kind of this opportunity with Hiro came along and it was really like, okay, wait, so it's developer tools, it's in Bitcoin, which was always to me the kind of the most interesting of the cryptos, just given the global adoption and acceptance of it. And I really liked the team. I just liked the people I was going to be dealing with. And I think that's one of the most important things when you're at a company is just like, do you like the people you show up to every day with? And, to kind of the why Bitcoin question and the reason that I'm so dedicated now to like, why are we trying to make Bitcoin programmable at Hiro? Look, I grew up in the US. I have always had access to a really powerful legal and financial system. And I am very aware of like the business opportunities, the things I've been able to do simply because like I'm able to go get a bank account that interacts with a bunch of people. I'm able to like sign contracts with people and trust that like for any of the flaws of the US legal system, they're still pretty enforceable. Like you can still pretty much trust people when you're going to do business with them. And like the fundamental thing that Bitcoin did is not like some ledger, it's not like currency, whatever. It's decentralized trust. And so the idea to me of being able to take, kind of that privilege of the legal and financial system that I have here in the US and make it cross-border, global, everyone access to it. Like that's pretty damn cool. That's really powerful when you think about it. And that's not going to happen at the L1. We've decided that Bitcoin's going to have 4 megabyte blocks. We've decided that it's going to do a few thousand transactions every 10 minutes. And that as it gets more popular, those transactions are going to be really expensive and it's not going to have compute at the L1. Again, these decisions have just kind of been made by the community at this point, and they're not necessarily wrong. I think there's a really strong argument for why you want compute not at the L1 and why you want it simple and stable. Although we probably still should have OpCat, but that's a whole other conversation. But so it's clear to me like, all right, yeah, you know what? We're going to need Bitcoin L2s. We need to bring this power to kind of around the world so everyone can have access to this same legal and financial. Governments aren't going to do it for us. And like, I'm not someone who believes that like Bitcoin's going to replace the world government or something. But look, I'm a free marketer. Competition is good. And having an alternative for people means that not just will they be able to use it, but it means governments are going to have to be more receptive and they're going to have to respond to their people better. And so it's just, I think, has the potential to really improve lives around the world for a lot of people.
Yeah, well said. And it is a really fun industry to be working in if you've ever wanted to kind of work internationally as well.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, I want to work internationally one day, and then they're like, oh, I got to go work for like a Morgan Stanley, and then get to some job, and eventually I have like a business trip over to Asia, or like I get to go to Europe to see something and work and learn more about different cultures and how they work from a business set internationally. The second you join this industry, you're instantly tossed into like Telegram channels and different conferences
Yep.
and coordinating things. And it's like, oh, I'm coordinating something in Singapore the next week or Lisbon the next week. And you really kind of get this global sense of we're all kind of trying to work in a direction together, but there are like many different levels of what's possible at different countries, like you're saying, like legal structures and bank accounts and like feeling safe with your money in a bank, inflation, right? Inflation's a huge deal, and like everyone's feeling that just a little bit more today now in the US than they've kind of ever felt it. And so it's a very invigorating, I would say, industry to be a part of, especially if you're someone younger that's out there.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and just touch a little bit. I got a little bit of time left. Like, what's the like? What are you doing for fun out there? Like, I see you've got like
Yeah.
solar panels. You're working on all sorts of fun
Yeah,
things. Like for me, it's like it's exciting to see just like the side of you that's like, hey, I'm gonna keep pushing the boundaries in all these other places. Like before
yeah.
we got on, you like talked about your camera and like all this extra stuff that you did. Most people are like, I just need a webcam. I'm done. What's kind of making you take that extra step and all these little things that you do in your life?
Yeah, so for context, I live in Bozeman, Montana, or just outside Bozeman, really, on like 5 acres, and I have a tractor. By the way, if you're on Twitter, tractor content, people love tractor content. And I put in a bunch of solar panels and like taking the house totally off grid and things. And I love posting and talking about like what I'm doing and the side projects. One of the things that really pushes me, actually, that causes me to play with a lot of this stuff is like, one, I've just always been a tinkerer. And two, especially as like a CEO of a company and where you're working on really long time frames, I'm sure this will resonate with you, is like just building anything with my hands and just like watching something go from like not a thing to a thing in like an hour or two period is super satisfying. So
Yeah.
like later today or tomorrow, I have to go out and like regrade part of my driveway because like it got messed up over the winter. And it's going to be really satisfying to drive a tractor up and down my driveway for like 30 passes just to get it like cleaned up and looking better on it. So yeah, big fan of just like being able to get outside and do anything and fix stuff and do things with my hands on it. And then yeah, I've got a nice camera setup here. I think there's a tweet thread somewhere in my tweet history, if you look for camera or Sony or whatever, that'll break down exactly what the setup I have is for both audio and video. Because like, I don't know, I want to look good when people like yourself are nice enough to invite me on a nice live stream like this. I want to look good for people.
No, I love that. And yeah, like just some of the things like I do, a decent amount of like woodworking, I've built some stuff, and there is something about like, in the everyday of being a CEO, it's like, hey, we're going to build this product forever. Right. And we're just going to keep iterating on it. It never ends. To be able to go and say, okay, I'm just going to build, like a little deck, little landing that goes to like my front door. And it's like, I know that that's going to have like a finite finish and you're going to feel good about that when that's complete. And like getting outside to do something, it's like, I think, go back to like the first startup I was at, and I was younger, I was in my 20s. It was like, I just need to work till like 2 a.m. every night and not do anything else. And you do burn out, right? Like I don't think we're all Elon, right? Like you actually need to do some things. And then unlike Elon too, it's like, you probably have to like, if you have a family, you like have to do the dishes, or maybe there's some laundry you got to do, or like other things. You have to remember that that's there. And all of that together, if all those other things in your personal life are in a really good place, then your professional life just kind of carries that forward.
Yeah, I could not agree strong enough. By the way, I'm curious. So when you say woodworking, like, are you building like furniture and like artistic stuff?
No, not furniture. Like I have built like the thing that I'm my monitor is on here, like a little like cabinet, like a little shelf there with all like glued together and hidden. I with some family members, I have built some furniture before with like the Festool, and like gotten down to like a 16 inch. It's like that thing under my TV, like that's coming with me if I ever move. Like that thing is coming off the wall. But that is like a completely different level for anyone that doesn't know. Like building like furniture is so hard compared to like a deck.
Dude, it's crazy. And I'm like I'm not an artistic person at all. So like trying to visualize like how that wood should fit together to create the thing, like just is not happening for me. It's just not the way that my brain fires on it. But like DIY stuff, I absolutely love. Electrical. I love doing electrical work.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll do my switches. Like I just did the switch where it's like now I can like speak to the switch and to say like lights go to 20%. That's like a
Yeah.
life changer, especially if you have like kids. Like I've got 2 little ones and like
Yep.
now I can just like
What,
tell the
what's
house
your
what
home
to do.
automation platform?
Google
Oh, okay. So if you really want to go nuts, the thing you got to check out is Home Assistant, which is an open source
Home Assistant.
package. And
Okay.
it'll integrate almost everything that you have. But like the thing that's amazing about it is it's I mean, people have written, because it's open source, people have written every possible integration that you can do. So number one, speaking of control and decentralization, it's you can run stuff entirely locally, so you're not dependent on the cloud. Like all of my
Nice.
lights and stuff, all automated, but all running entirely locally. Um, and you have cool things like I have a package for it called adaptive lighting. So like you have to say like lights to 20%. I don't even have to do that. My lights just based on some light sensors and stuff turn on and off throughout the day and like adjust to levels based on where they should be. And then I have walls, there's a button on the wall I can hit to adjust it. But like even like on my computer, when my camera turns on to join a meeting like this, it turns off the lights behind me on the ceiling and turns on the video lighting around it. And then when I shut off the camera when we get off this call, it'll flip it again. So like if
Love
you
that.
just want,
I have Stream Decks. I still have to press a button for all that to
oh yeah,
happen, but
I have a
yeah.
Stream Deck too, but like every time I'm joining a Zoom and leaving, I don't want to have to do that. So check out Home Assistant. It's an amazing, amazing piece of software with a huge community. Now, I'll caveat it. You have to like tinkering because it will break like once a month or something because people update
Yes.
things and a lot of the stuff is hacked in because a lot of like these people don't want you using their stuff with an open source package. But oh my God, the power that it has is truly incredible.
I love that. I'll check that out. And people probably think we're crazy a little bit, but it's like the convenience side of being able to just like if I'm gonna do like say 100 live streams or like how many Zooms
Yeah.
are you on, and like the amount of time that I save just from like opening and shutting, like that shit adds up.
It's just the mental. Well, and I'm a big believer that if you're going to do automation, it should actually automate things. You know what another one is? Like we get takeout food. Like I'll go and pick up takeout food, and not insubstantial amount of time. I have an automation set up that when I'm 5 minutes away from home, coming back with the food, it sends a notification to my wife that like, hey, Alex is like 5 minutes away coming back. So she just like knows, okay, like cool, like a heads up, and then I don't have to remember to like send her a text message saying like I'm on the way back with it or whatever. Like there's just all kinds of little stuff you can do with that. Like obviously
Yes.
notifications. If someone pulls into our driveway, I run an AI detection thing model locally on all the cameras, and like so the camera will pick it up and send a notification to us being like, hey, there's a car in the driveway.
Yeah, it's like this person from Twitter is showing up because they're wearing the the Bored Ape mask.
I do kind of want to add the license plate and facial detection to it too. I'm not going to lie, that would be cool. But again, only if I can run it locally. I do not trust the cloud for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's just little things, man, that add to your day, like, and they actually will give you so much time back. And then depending on who you are, it's like I'm always messing with like lighting and like my wife's like,
So
why are you opening and closing all the lights all the time? Like the mood needs to be right in here for us to
I'll say I don't think there's any question that I have without a doubt spent more time automating these things than it has saved me. But the difference is I enjoy the automation part and I enjoy not having to think about all the other stuff. So even though like, yes, would it have taken me less time to send those text messages or to press the buttons on and off? Absolutely. But like those are annoying, mundane tasks that I hate. Whereas, like playing with it and programming and fixing it's kind of a lot of fun and just good for my tinkerer brain. And then the satisfaction of stuff just having, like you said, like the satisfaction of never really having to touch a light switch and just having the lights automatically adjust and kind of like be at the right level. Same thing with like shades. It's wonderful. I love it. So it's good for that.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, there must be something about us where it's like I really like to mess with like the settings, like the
Yeah.
settings apps,
Oh
and a
my
lot of
God.
things are like Zoom has so many settings. People are like, how did you figure out how to get a video? I was like, I don't know. I was like deep into the settings
So
one
are
day.
you also then like as soon as a new version of a piece of software comes out, you're like updating it so that you can
Oh
see
yeah,
like what new settings and things to play with there are?
yeah. Nothing ever works because it's all in beta.
Yeah,
Like,
100%. 100% for me too. And like it's hilarious because again, my wife is like the opposite. And I know so many people are the opposite who are like desperately avoiding and they're like two major upgrades behind. And I'm
I'm like,
always
you
on
got
like,
1,000 0 days that you're just waiting to take you over. Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
fine.
Absolutely. And I'm just like, nope, please give me like all of the newest things and like show me every single setting I might be able to tweak and play with. And yeah.
So much fun. All right, man. Well, this was a lot of fun. Everyone listening, Alex Miller, CEO Hero. Alex, just give everyone a quick, what can we look forward to and expect from you guys in the next like
Yeah,
couple months
I'm gonna
here? I know
plug
you
I'm
can't
gonna
give me
plug
the
a few
5-year
things
plan, but
while we're talking. Like I said, so for Hero, like I said, dev tools company for Stacks and Bitcoin. There's a ton of amazing things happening on the Stacks ecosystem right now. And again, Stacks is a project that's all about making Bitcoin programmable. I don't know if you saw it. There's a new like security bounty program that just got
I did
announced
see that,
today
the
by
white hat
Bitcoin L2
program.
Labs. Orange hats. There you go.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
orange
white
hat.
hats. So basically, like $1 million being invested in helping basically get white hats to do code and penetration testing of applications on the Stacks ecosystem. This is coming alongside a lot of security work. Like I said, that's done by Bitcoin L2 Labs. I actually learned about this when everyone else did. In my case, for Hero, we're doing a lot of work around just how can we make tooling to make writing secure code more easily, because that's obviously like just a big focus for a lot of people. The Stacks testnet just merged from Bitcoin testnet. I don't know if anyone who's tried to develop on Bitcoin, Jameson Lopp decided that Bitcoin testnet needed to be reset, and so has just griefed the crap out of it for the last few months. So we actually moved on the Stacks testnet to Bitcoin reg test instead of testnet. So it works amazing now. Stacks Foundation just announced a new like 10,000 STX per month program for developers working on a project. So basically, if you make substantial commits to your project in a month, you can apply and win part of a pool of 10,000 STX every month.
Wow.
So it's the Code for STX announcement. So just Google that, check out the Stacks Foundation Twitter. They've got a bunch there. So there's just, I don't know, especially like I said, this is Bitcoin L2 summer, especially with the Nakamoto release coming up for the Stacks ecosystem. There's just so much exciting stuff going on. Like I said, my team
We
and
didn't even
Hero
talk about like the grayscale ETF.
Oh
Or
God,
not ETF,
yeah,
like the grayscale trust.
Taxi team. Again, that's like
That's
so on
huge.
the financial side. That's like not something that I ever really think about
Totally. Yeah.
or deal
Little
with at
cherry
all.
on top.
I literally found out about that when they announced it on Twitter. Had no idea it was coming. But it's cool. It's really wonderful to see, the institutional adoption in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and watching Grayscale push into doing Bitcoin L2s like Stacks is just a great sign of like how much institutional support there is there.
Yeah. If you're a developer and you're out there and you love Bitcoin and you wanna develop on Bitcoin or as close as possible, like, give Alex a call.
This
Stacks.
is the place to do it. Hero can help you do that. So
Yeah.
check out hero.so for that.
Amazing, man.
And then follow me
go
on
ahead.
Twitter for both great crypto and tractor content.
Yes, tractor, homesteading, all of the above, and a couple of laughs along the way. It's really good stuff. All right, Alex. Thank you so much, man. Thank you everyone out there for listening. This was great. And follow us next week. We got Leonidas talking about runes coming on. No camera for him though.
I
So
feel
it'll
like
be
it's
all
not
audio.
I feel like it's not just runes he'll be talking about. Cough, dog, cough. All right, dude. Thanks so much for having me. It's been wonderful.